what's at 26% and why can't you charge it?
Because apparently, so first of all, you have to understand, I'm running off of one daisy chained extension cord into 1, 2, 3 connectors, no fewer than 7 devices. Okay. And so it's 7 devices all going back to one outlet. Right. And I mean, I was under the impression that electricity is just available and maybe not. I don't know.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Third World Urbina.
So like in my mind, I have never had this particular problem. There have been other problems, believe me, but not this problem. And I'm 100% sure it's related to power. And I'm kind of a tear lately. You don't want to hear this because you're on a sober kick, but like for 2 days, I've been very, very drunk for 2 full days and not really doing everything right. And I left my charger at Brandon's place in San Miguel Chapultepec. And so I think that the charger is not right. And I bought another one, but it's only for iPhone, which I don't think works for the Lappy. I don't know, man. It's all a fuck is what it is.
I don't know that I've seen this guy ever quite a mess as such.
Well, there is like a Mercury retrograde happening, which maybe that means fuck all to you, but it's just...
I mean, I can say that I would have never thought I'd hear those words out of your mouth, although maybe Mercury is the cause for your problem.
I'm going with whatever I can get here, all right? It's whatever it is. It's not because I've been steadily drunk for 2 days. I promise you that.
It's because of the Mercury.
In my retrograde.
Oh my God.
Well, it's the best it's going to be. And you do look very svelte and bird shirted. So I think we're good here.
Little svelty bird shirt. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm ready. I'm charging. I have power. I'm in America. I kind of have got it all. I've got a lot going for me.
I don't know what that means anymore.
Look what we have. We have Starbuckses. We have Perrier's.
Wow.
If needs be, even though I'm sober, I could have myself a cinnamon Zin. I could have a nice nicotine.
What is that, like the little white thing that goes in your gums?
It's a gums white. It's a little upper decker buzz bag.
Right. No, I've seen those they're really big in Sweden right now. And like there's this Swedish TikToker girl I follow, and they did a thing where they went all around the room and they all went and they all showed off the little shit thing. Yeah. Oh, you got one going.
Little bottom decker buzz bag. No, they go in the top lip. Otherwise, it gets into your salivary glands and it creates just a roaring inferno of cinnamon saliva.
One of the things we've talked about, you always tease me because I don't think you've ever smoked tobacco, which I have off and on since I was like 14. So blah blah blah. You would say joke to me, but was that a good burning tobacco leaf in your mouth hole or whatever fucking bullshit you'd say? And I'd be like, yes, it was. But it's a common misunderstanding amongst non-smokers that to smoke, you're doing it to relieve stress. Mm-hmm. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's actually to induce a heightened state of mental awareness and more stress. I want to intentionally stress myself out and focus my brain more on like other shit because like I need that for some reason. So is it the same sort of buzz where you're like a little like on edge because of the shit in your mouth?
100%. I like my back up against the wall on edge.
Are you being sarcastic or is that a genuine reply?
No, that's a genuine reply. No, that how you described it is exactly it. And I have never been a fan of nicotine into the lungs or into the stomach, and this has to kind of end up in the stomach. I like a nice nicotine patch, to be honest, but I made it through the introductory period of nausea. For me, nicotine taken into my face hole or lungs is a little nauseating, and this, you just have to persevere.
So good, because that's the exact same experience with smoking. It's not natural. We talked last week about people that have fish and that have coffee, and I'm like, oh, it's great. I love this fish and or coffee because it's so fishy or coffee like. Well, no, the opposite is true. You want it to be as less coffee like as possible, as least fish like as possible. Probably It's the same thing with the whatever that little bag bomb is you have in your mouth.
It's a mouth bag bomb. But yeah, I mean they make it an assortment of flavors, and I've tried a few cinnamon. I've always been a fan of cinnamon, and then it's nice to have like a zingy sense associated with the feeling. It convinces you that it's working more. I'm sure they could make it some sort of a neutral flavor, but the cinnamon aggressively giving me canker sores in my gums is like, man, that's how you know it's good.
Do you know who Tony Gwynn was?
Of course.
Do you know how Tony Gwynn died?
You've made a connection here, so something having to do with what we just said, but I don't know, ripping a lip full of dip while on the shitter.
Yeah, exactly. For years. And I mean, you were talking about one of the most elite athletes in any sports history. He was drafted both as a Clipper and as a Padre at the same day, I think, and hit more consistently and with more duration and regular than any other player. I mean, he may not have had as many hits as like Pete Rose, but he just was an incredible person.
Yeah.
And he died really young. And like, I mean, I'm sure his family was happy because he left them a lot of money, but I'm sure there were people who were very disappointed. I think he's like 60 or something.
Yeah, I'm sure that his family was very happy when their main best friend died. That's a good point. when the hero of their life ceased to exist, they're like, well, at least I have all this money, but I do miss my father.
So we're creating a safe space in which, just like your car joyride, whatever bullshit,
the icy boy.
Yeah, we're allowed to say anything, even if it's morbid or off color or politically incorrect, as long as it's like slightly funny. Then that's fine.
Yeah, I live my life that way, but then there's something just beyond the edge of what's tolerable, even in a reasonably polite society, and that's reserved for the icy boy.
Okay, got it. Okay, so let's evaluate what we've done here. Have we trespassed the line whereby beloved American sports heroes from California are dying with gratitude of their greedy family, or is that?
Hey, this astrology life of yours has made you soft. I'm talking about dropping hard R's, buddy. I'm talking about mostly referring to the murder of children and the usage of the socially inappropriate hard R.
Okay, good. The hard R. I will say ninja and be fine with it, but there are other things that I say that are terrible and upsetting, and I've lost friends over. So
yeah, no, I mean, I am like anything that you could put in the category of saying the N-word in any, like around any, because even with me and Mike, like it's a harsh word on its own. The way it's received by people is absolutely banish you from culture. And even for us, when you throw it out, like all you can do is either laugh insanely or just facepalm it. Like I don't believe in magic words. Like if you just say a word and it makes you sad, like grow the fuck up. But it does have that context in culture, and so I just like playing around with dangerous words. So no. The death of Tony Gwynn for money is a 3 out of 10 for offensiveness.
So the big concern that I have is that when we're creating content, and I'm very aware of this because like I use a different name, right? With the business, I'm Zachary Elliott, and we encourage the girls to do kind of that too. They can come up with whatever they want to, because I always say, well, if you feel guilty about this later, just say it's fine. I was young, I needed the money. And so it's very common, like maybe 80% of everyone uses some kind of a different name, because what happens is that when we put a thing on the internet, if it's slutty pics on a website or malicious banter between two brothers from California, we're creating a thing that's never destroyed. And so like we would have a joke and it would be N-word, ninja. 35 years from now, some internet archivist would dig it up and be like, everything you've done up until this point in your life is forsaken.
Yeah, and you're done.
Non grata, because one time you made an off-color joke because you were stupid with your brother. And I would hope to avoid that if possible.
Yeah. I mean, I have enough presence of mind that I'm not going to say anything like that. And then I have also lived a life of, despite many addictions, of integrity in such a way where like I've ran that simulation of let's try to cancel Noah, and like I can't think of a human being in my life that wouldn't stand up for me, and so I'm not too worried about it.
Wow. Okay. So first of all, kudos to you, because I always think of myself as a person with integrity, but I'm also kind of vindictive. Yeah. More so than you are. And so there are people who I promise you that not just have said it to my face, because I've been starting this business 5 years ago, 3 malicious death threats that were like meaningful. But I know that there are people, probably like some of the saltier females in the business, like the talent, who are just accustomed to everything they say is the law and spun gold, that would have wished me death. And so like when you're like, oh, 100% of people would stand up for me, I think in my life it's like maybe 50-50.
Yeah, I think you're highlighting up right near the top of the maximum difference between you and I.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because like I've actually thought about it in the times I've been really isolated when I started out here, being in a new place and not having a network of friends yet. And so I thought about if shit really hit the fan, because like when you're thinking about running a simulation of suicide or just worrying about what's the worst things can get, like I have touched in a non-sexual but a friendly and meaningful way, like a momentous network of people that, even though I don't often think that highly of myself, I do know that a lot of people do, and I bring a lot of light to people. And that at a certain point, especially after through this ayahuasca experience, that I have a newfound understanding of legacy, because like that was really driven into my experience, like because it forces you to think so infinitely and so broadly that even if I don't have a legacy that is as large as I anticipate it to be, just the kindnesses I have shared with people is undoubtedly going to be a legacy that I take along with me.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's wonderful. I will tokenize or bribe really with money,
Yeah.
a lot of it, and because of that, I think that that buys me more leeway. But I don't think that's actually true. So my legacy is
Yeah.
that bribery and modest corruption, but only to accomplish good things, not to, like, I don't know, poison pelican eggs or
Yeah. Yeah.
like leave asbestos in like a field somewhere. It's really just to accomplish what I want. But because of that, there's another word for that. Transactional. It's a transactional thing. So that's what's gotten me into trouble with like Brie, for example, like this nightmare. I created a monster
Yeah.
because
Of course.
I gave her all this money and we built this whole life. And when she betrayed me, I was like, well, shouldn't the money have taken care of that? And the reality is that no, it won't at all.
That's thin gruel, buddy.
It's terrible. So
Yeah.
I'm more, as I've gotten older, there's a common phrase that like Octavian Caesar became Augustus. He got older because like Octavian was the grandnephew of Julius Caesar, and he was kind of a little shit when he was young and entitled. And as he got older, he got wise and kind of became more beneficent. What I would prefer not to do, although the business kind of demands this of me, is go from Anakin to Darth Vader, where I give up all of my humanity and become full robot and murder anyone who stands in my way. Which I think it's my impulse, but I don't know that that's the correct impulse.
Well, I'll tell you, fella, it's not something that I would generally bring up to you or to somebody generally, but like transactional is a word that I have used to describe you, and I mean sometimes in a positive way, but sometimes not. But it's like there is a time and a place for that. But if you do rely on that, it'll fix something in the moment, but it doesn't hold the legacy strength of like somebody not being willing to turn on you and that sort of stuff. Because like it's that thing about a compromise or a deal, like where both sides leave a little annoyed, but you had to do what you had to do. And I don't know that has a long-standing benefit, but it's also something that I've been impressed by. It's just not how I live my life, and vengeance has never been a part of how I do things. Maybe being hypersensitive, that like imagining making a situation that sucks a fat bag of dicks like 10 times worse because I'm mad. I've never been able to justify that.
Well, bless you, sir. And we have a lot to learn from each other, because I have like in a Ephebe in my business, this guy, Austin, who's so great. He's ambitious and optimistic and good with the girls, ambitious to want to bring them into the business, but not a creep at all.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, you're such a good person, but he so regularly gets fucked over.
Sure.
Like, no, be tough and tell people what you want and be direct and get in their face if you have to. And it's just he's so Canadian, he doesn't have that within him. So I think that it's like a grass is always greener. And
of course.
Really tough. They're like, oh, but if I was less of a Vader and more of a human, then maybe I would, not have these problems. But then I don't think I would be able to accomplish almost any of the things that I've done unless
you're right.
Yeah, like kind of a dirt bag, a little bit not shady, but a little bit transactional.
And sharky.
Sharky, correct. Yeah, absolutely. Starker, if we were using the Yiddish.
Get a load of this, dude. All right. So on that note, I found a journal that I started writing just over 20 years ago, because I have been writing consistently for that long as far as journaling. And if I'm 19, 20, you're 21, 22. And one of the questions is describe yourself using an animal. I don't remember what mine was, but yours was a lion for sure. As far as like something taken by force, not to be fucked with, etc. And like at your ambition and all that at 22 was still very noticeable then. And yeah, I mean, I don't know really how much we changed from our nature, because a lot of that is a combo of our nature and of figuring out of the traumas we endured to trying to find a path through it. And like yours was always very different, but like that thing that I described that I am is also born out of like people pleasing and not wanting to upset the apple cart, and of course getting walked on. And so you find a way to like set boundaries as you get older, but I don't know that it's one's better or one's worse in the long run. I guess we'll see. But yeah, mine's born out of trying to just like be the perfect child.
Yeah, I don't even know what perfect is. I've always been way too comfortable making mistakes, bumping into the walls. It wasn't until I was working for Richard at the second Malibu rehab when I was like, oh, you mean driving like an asshole, you know, being kind of very quick to judge or quick to sum something up, and then willing to fight or like get in someone's face for what you want. I always was a little guilty about that, or felt a little guilty about that. But when I met him, I was like, oh, I should actually do more of this and be more impetuous and impulsive, because if I am, you kind of like fence off some area around you. I don't want anybody else's bullshit to matter more than mine. And it's not the longevity. We have to be enlightened in our self-interest, right?
Yeah, sure.
The legacy you leave, just like with him, people are like, oh, Richard. And it's the same thing with me, I'm sure. And that's why he and I got into it at times. It's like, oh, Zachary, you know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing. One of the things I've noticed as I've gotten older is that if I'm aware of that, I'm less likely to bring it out all the time, because with the old boss, with Richard, everything was an emergency. And if everything's an emergency, nothing's an emergency. And so my goal for myself in all of this is, if I can crack a joke and laugh at myself, mostly, right? Then people are like, he's okay. He understands that he's like a loudmouth jackass.
Yeah.
Something kind of endearing about that. And then two, only use that card, you know, in the fucking deck if I absolutely need to, or like it will help accomplish a goal that I wouldn't otherwise be able to accomplish. In this country, because they always expect Americans to be insane and to be assholes all the time because of just this shitty reputation as Americans, the littlest joke about like, oh, mi español es horrible, disculpa, I said my Spanish is so bad, I'm so sorry. Well, things like that, they just laugh and laugh, because they know that we're loudmouth and know-it-all and bossy and crazy. But when we admit it, then it's like you've preserved some aspect of your humanity and you've redeemed it, kind of.
Yeah. And what you're describing is a lot like going from, not so much the last part, but just before, going from a hammer to curating being a more of a scalpel and less of a hammer.
Right. Okay. So that's a great line about people and attorneys. And we talked about this before. You're like, well, how does all this go when you're fighting with everybody with attorneys? Yeah. The line that I learned from the old boss was, to a man with a hammer, everyone is a nail. Yeah. I've done so much of that I've kind of placed that mentality in people who were close to me. And I was like, well, don't do that. You're just creating more monsters. I'm like a monster machine over here. Because like some of the girls who are smart enough and work with me long enough, they're like, we're going to get him in the same way. I was like, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to do that. And I don't know. A lot of that is like, do as I say, not as I do, because, you know, Richard was like that too. And I don't have a problem being the occasional villain, you know. This boss that I'm always talking about, who made I would call him my mentor, who made so much of an impact on me. He was so smart about when to use it and when not to use it. He could play the good cop and the bad cop in the same person in the same sense. He would say something like, son, you couldn't hurt me harder if you tried, but it's only because I love you that I always keep you around. I'm like, wow, there's a knife in my back and a pat on my head. Yeah. And he's a genius like that. And to know how to do that it's a little sociopathic, but it's a genius move. And so whatever we decide to do, whether it's you're going to be the goodest shepherd, the kindest to your flock, right, or the most malevolent, you know, Shakespearean villain that could exist, is just to do it appropriately. It's you know, not to be a sucker when you shouldn't be a sucker, and not to be a villain when you're just like come on, don't kick the puppy. That you should not kick that puppy, please.
Yeah, you and I were going through that. That reminds me, because I forgot that you and I were going through a similar, in our own way, transformational period at the same time, with Dane being the same thing that you just described about Richard. Because not only would he do the same thing, his was more like the 4D chess version of it, and maybe Richard's was too, is that knowing exactly how people think and knowing how much smarter he was than everybody. Like, it was an intentional manipulation tactic to raise the energy to frustration and anger, only to land in, you know, everything coming together again, because there's also something very relieving about landing at that spot at the end of it. And so, like, even when he would argue with his fiance at the time, like, initially I was like, dang, that was a crazy conversation to listen to. And then as he discussed it, it's like every word I said, everything I I did was intentional so that we could land at this spot of, boy, what a roller coaster of emotion that was, and boy, how relieving it is to end the way that we did. And he was so manipulative, that rubbed me the wrong way, but it was also pretty impressive. And that's what I imagine, if you do upset people, you personally, in the long run, that like, all right, you could say he's this and he's that, but in the end, you can't deny the ambition, the motivation, and the energy and the effort someone puts into pushing their agenda forward. And that's something that I've always noticed with you, is that regardless of how you do it, just because it's not how I would, doesn't make it right or wrong, but that there's just no denying the effort and ambition that you're willing to put into those things. And honestly, I didn't think I would have ever brought this up, but I didn't really have role models growing up. And so when I got to like 14, 15, 16, even though you were elsewhere, how you behaved stood out a lot. And so without a model for behavior that was like usable, like Dad's not really, I acted like you in freshman year, sophomore year, and it got me in a lot of trouble. Lost friends, got teachers upset with me, like fucking with my substitute teachers because of things that you did, that you told me about. Like, they're just there for a day, man. They can't really do much about it, and fucking with substitutes and acting out in class. And in the end, I'm like, oh, I see what I was doing. I was adopting a pattern of behavior that doesn't really suit me and didn't really feel good to do, but it did get reactions. But I realized I didn't really have a person to look up to behaviorally. And so, yeah, I look back on it, and for sure I did that. It was very out of character, and I could feel myself doing it. I'm like, hey, I'm kind of angry deep down. I have a little bit of this in me. Let's give it a whirl.
That's awesome. So it sucks when that happens. If I would have met, because like I had the first Jewish entrepreneur boss, Steve, when I was like 16.
Yeah.
And he was a good guy, and he was real savvy. And I mean, not a lot of what we learned was not very relevant, because we would take out print ads for like penis pumps and
pheromones.
Yeah, human pheromones, all this bullshit. And it was an ad in like men's fitness and men's health, or like Maxim or whatever. And he was doing his best. He was buying it, white labeling it on his own. But a lot of the things that I learned from him, it's not relevant anymore. It was pre-internet. We're talking like 1997, I started working for him. So none of that really matters. But if I would have had like Richard, because I met Richard and started working for him when I was like 34. If I would have had him when I was 20, I would never have gone to university. I learned more from him a year than I learned in 4 years of USC. It was bullshit. And those little things, because we were young, especially because we're kind of very sensitive, both our parents are very sensitive, you can absorb every little thing, good, bad, or indifferent. And if you have social grace, maybe you know when to use it. And if you're like me, where you just say fucking shit just to perturb people and to provoke people, you're going to catch the fucking hand every time. I want to say that the one thing, because both of our parents are like interesting, but also kind of not. Mom only got one thing right about us, and it was probably the last time I'll ever mention her in this particular setting, which is that I was truth at any price and you were peace at any price.
Yeah.
And that's very wise and insightful. I guess that's the one thing she could be wise and insightful about, is her children. That kind of caustic, conflict-oriented thing has helped me as much as it's hurt me. Yeah. And the only thing I want to take away from it is I want to do less of what happened with you, because I don't want other people to run with it. And I would like to know when to use it more appropriately. Yeah. Because if the samurai always has their fucking sword out, no one's going to take that shit seriously. Really, it's the sword comes out when it's appropriate to bring out.
Yeah, to have a sword, to know how to use it, and only use it when absolutely necessary.
That's the goal. I mean, if possible. That's why I find that the only real thing, and this is how you and I've always been, is very philosophical, that has a redeeming quality pretty much all the time, is being funny. And even now here, like when I'm walking around and doing my thing, I'm just like, I don't want to be perceived as a giant jerk, because I'm so tall compared, like I'm 6 foot. It's a short country and they're not tall people. And so I'm like, well, if they kind of see me as menacing, that's just a natural human instinct to see somebody taller kind of menacing. What can I do to make this less horrible? Because I'm a foreigner. I'm here on borrowed time because they have lax immigration policies and it's relatively inexpensive to live. Like, don't be a jerk if you're just a guest. You don't want to shit bed. Try to be nice to these fucking people. Jesus.
Yeah. I was wondering how much, Zach, you were going to put into your Mexico time, thinking like that you already stand out enough, and that being an asshole to a culture like that, you're asking for fucking trouble, dude.
No, and that's kind of the point. And so the troubles have been relatively minimal. I broke a girl's heart last like January, or this January, and that couldn't be avoided. It was fine. I navigated as best I could, and like our little friend group kind of felt the ripple, and and then it kind of went back to good. But in terms of like just like, you know, Joe Schmo or like Jose Schmoze here, I don't want to do that. No. So I've managed to have no real conflicts. I got harassed by the cops one time, but like I was out drunk off my ass at 4 o'clock in the morning, and like not only did I cross through like a what do you call it, a crosswalk, I also waved to the cop like an idiot just because I was drunk and fearless, and they immediately came for me, and I was like, okay, so I brought that one on myself. And they, like a lot of the policia here, were just corrupt and looking to pat me down for my protection, and they went through my wallet, and I fortunately donated all my cash to the bar that particular evening. So I basically got away scot-free, but I totally had it coming because I was an idiot and it was late at night. And other than that, I would just prefer to stay at home and focus that particular energy on the business, and only when necessary.
So I've made a friend out here who is 26 years old, and I have been not impressed with anybody that age in a very long time. Like, it seems like an entire generation of fucking Adderall addicted, short attention span maniacs and I mean that from a very young age. It's one thing to take on that kind of chemical as an adult, but to know nothing other than a lifetime of fucking smartphones and iPads and short attention span coupled with amphetamines is like creating a generation of monsters, or maybe that's curmudgeon talking. And so he and I he's very, very intelligent, but talk a lot about just the way culture is going and how people are spending so much time trying to convince people it's the greatest time to be alive and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, how come it doesn't fucking feel that way, man? How come it feels like there's so much suffering and so much pain and so much struggle, and people don't know what to do, and the future is not guaranteed anymore? It's all a little bit peculiar. And so based on that, we joke around about a lot of cynical shit for sure. And so we were ripping the other day and landed on something called the Center for Masochistic Arts. So when you get to the point where like people are doing these cold plunges and saunas and all these ways to impose suffering unto yourself in order to better tolerate what's going on in the world, we just took that to the extreme and called it perspective training, to take into the brink of your tolerance to better deal with a dying culture, and or to raise your threshold of suffering. And so if you go to a place that fucking, we're talking shin kicking and sleep deprivation and waterboarding and paper cuts, you know, the classics, but you go to a center where they have just maximized their precision and their ability to do you harm in order to come back to the world and better able to deal with the absolute insanity that's going on, and we called it brinking, taking you to the brink so that you come back to reality and you're like, it's actually not that bad, not compared to the fucking 6 hours of blue balls that I endured. So having a center dedicated to being horrible to you, to give you some perspective that the dying world is not as bad as you thought, that we locked onto that for hours on end. I just wrote it all down, but there is like an endless amount of material in that concept. We got really stuck on brinking as this new fucking social thing to take you to the edge of suffering so that the world itself didn't seem so bad. So that was one that I really got locked into. And in the vein of like corporations taking a stand on things like Israel-Palestine, Bud Light, and fucking trans stuff, corporate-sponsored police brutality seemed like it had it had some legs on it. It's like, yeah, we're taking a stand. We feel that that's not that bad, and we're putting logos on their cars, and we're encouraging beatings. That was another good one.
So like you're getting a phone call from a donation, or like from the tomb of the unknown Klansman, and they would like to continue abusing minorities with your kind contribution or donation.
And like, you get some downloads of some things that were perpetrated onto the innocent that day to show you want to see how your money's working for you, you know? All right, and then we got assisted suicide pods now available at Walmart to let your loved ones join you, and so they could watch you die, and then that'll earn them 20% off of their purchase, excluding sale item. Like, so
that if you watch it, because it's almost like a direct sales opportunity.
Yeah, I mean,
die, then you
there. Yeah, so assisted suicide at Walmart, that seemed like a good thing. They're like, I mean, people are dying, and I mean, if they're gonna die here, bring a few people in, we'll get you a little discount.
Okay, so let me pause you there. You got to keep going. I love this. But one of the reasons why people talk about David Foster Wallace is that he did exactly what you're doing, which is that this corporate takeover of all aspects of humanity is absurd. But if you just attack it like, I don't know, Greenpeace or things like that, like far lefty things, it kind of falls flat because it puts us in this us versus them dichotomy. And you're like, well, of course you don't want whaling, and of course you don't want police brutality. Like it's very obvious to do that. What he did was he tried to make it funny. But like the corporations have taken over in like Infinite Jest, and it's not the year 2007. It's the year of the adult depends undergarment. The depends adult undergarment, and you just okay, I get it immediately. And so to make it funny, I think is the only way that you can redeem anything about this, which is why kind of since Jon Stewart, we don't really look to the news for the truth. We look to comedians for the truth. Otherwise, of course, like you're like, oh, another politician has done a terrible act and is fully corrupt and millions of dollars in dead children and no one did a thing about it. I'm like, well, that's not surprising at all. But if you can find a way to make it funny, that's genius.
Yeah, I don't know that the percentage or the level of corruption has ever been any different. Like that seems like part and parcel of a governmental experience, but it seems like as we've entered the 2020s and such, like we demanded to the degree that we could a peek behind the curtain. And we have seen just glimpses of the monstrosity of horrible nonsense and bullshit. Now we're just like, I can't tell if there's more of it or that it's just being revealed just trickle by trickle. And it's like, yeah, I'd rather these big decisions that are corrupt in nature be made behind my back, because seeing it on the surface is nothing could make you feel fucking smaller, dude. All right, so now we are on to capital punishment. So the amount of people that have been attempted to be murdered by the state and have failed. So like you're talking somebody who got this cocktail of lethal injections and then they just fucking struggled to die for minutes and hours on end while they suffered. It's like hundreds of thousands of people are dying on accident every year from fucking fentanyl, carfentanil. I accidentally breathed it in. I was in the room with this fucking powder and I died because of it. I'm like, yeah, dude, fucking, we got it. We already have the fucking solution to that. There's all these potent drugs around. Like, let them ride a fucking little fentanyl train on the way out of town. Apparently, you're fucking done in 10 minutes. Like, how are we not using something like that? Jiminy. Or strap them down and pour a fucking tall cup of ayahuasca down their gullet and watch them writhe in the struggle of coming to terms with everything they've done and facing Judgment Day while strapped down on a fucking gurney. That would be a good one.
I think that people probably do that in more progressive circles, and that it's an oddly compassionate way to end lives. I think that the reason why that there's all this bungling of things like that isn't because they're intentionally trying to do it. They're talking about the lowest element of society. They're literally guarding incarcerated people. This is not the best and the brightest doing this kind of work. And I don't know. I think that you're probably right. And I would love to go out like that, like on a blaze of glory or something like that. That Hunter Thompson wanted his ashes shot out of a cannon. I think like Johnny Depp or something administered the lighting of the cannon. Yeah. Because the sentiment of it all, you don't want to just like wither away or whatever. You want to like go out in a blaze of glory. So I support that. I think not cynical, that's very compassionate.
Yeah, we have these legally approved cocktails that have been standardized that people take or are given when they get the death penalty. And recently I've heard people talking about, or it's shifting to firing squad, because there are still some states that firing squad is legal, where you put this target over their heart, 5 people shoot them in it, one of them has a blank, nobody knows who really did it, death is a certainty. And I'm like, well, that seems like a more reasonable way out than just somebody suffering ceaselessly. And then the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are just dying on accident. I'm like, they fucking figured it out.
That hard.
It seems to be easy enough that you can do it on accident. How are we failing on purpose?
Sure. And so here's the thing there. People do this all the time. And whether or not they leave a note or there's just ever justified a suicide, people make that choice all the time. And I find it fucked up. We were just talking about David Foster Wallace. All of the male heroes, like literary figures mostly that I looked up to, all killed themselves. Hunter Thompson, David Foster Wallace, Ernest Hemingway. There are a ton more that I'm forgetting right now. But like that happens all the time. And so to live deliberately is really what we're talking about here, is that you could die at any time. I always thought I would die in a car crash because I'm such a shitty driver, but like no, it should be a choice at a time. It's like we have on or at least on dad's side of the family adult relatives that have lived into extreme old age, and I figured it out just by watching it closely that it doesn't matter how old you live, the last 3 years you're just kind of like
the sinking ship.
Yeah, and it's no fun, and somebody else has to clean up after you, and you're probably gonna fall or whatever. It's misery. And I would much rather, instead of going to like 80 and like the last like 78, 79 and 80 are all shit, at 77, if you're just like, I'll take like the old fentanyl bath scrub or whatever it is they're offering at that time, and just did
Come
it.
on.
Done. That would be wonderful. I would.
Yeah, I'll take a fentanyl nasal spray and a Viking funeral. I want to be ripped apart by ocean predators. I want to enter the ecosystem. I want to become a field of mushrooms or a bounty of trees in a sad, sad forest. Like I'm fine with any of that.
Oh, I got a good one.
Yeah.
Amongst my friends here, everybody's unique, and that's why at some point in time, I really encourage you to visit Mexico City, because like we attract some weirdos, and it's very much like the gutsy, do whatever the fuck you want. I've lived outside the lines my whole life, and I choose to live here because it's interesting, and like my Spanish is okay. So one of our guys, Hunter, he's an attorney, and Hunter, right after the October 7th thing in Israel, he I think within a few days, like a week or something, tried to go to Israel.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I mean, that's a real gutsy move. I think they take security real seriously there. I don't know that that's going to work. And sure enough, he got there, and they basically were like, they're real tough on border control and security. Like, who are you here to see, or what are you here to do? And he's a tough looking guy, and they threw him out of the country. And so, he is an attorney. He's not stupid, but he's like a little young and brash. He's like 30. And I know his exact kind of thinking, because it's like, you're an attorney all day, and you're not even really an attorney. You're like, show up in this like telepresence thing that's like the representation of you from like the waist up, or like your dick out, or a penis pump going, but as long as you have a suit and tie above, nobody's gonna notice anything. And it's bullshit. It's all a fucking lie. And so then what does he do when he gets thrown out of Israel? He ends up going to Kiev, Ukraine, and a couple of days ago sent me photos over WhatsApp of him like delivering food and handing stuff off. And I'm like, you're crazy. But what that's coming out of isn't actually that he's crazy. It's that modern life has become so moderated and like filtered and bullshit that you're like, I wish to visit war-torn country X, whatever it is, only to remind myself that I am a human, and that life actually kind of matters sometimes, and it's not all decay and boredom and misery and like casual violence, that you could actually go to a thing and either make a positive impact on it, or at least be reminded that you are in fact an alive person.
The necessity is sitting at the surface instead of being forced to wade through a sea of bullshit to try to find a hint of need and hold on to it for as long as you can. Yeah, like it really reduces the human thing back to a thing that makes more sense as far as our genetics and biology are, rather than the kind of choice overload of infinite options out here that kind of gets in the way. Not to like denounce freedom, but there is a thing where you have so many options and so little obvious meaning.
No, there's nothing. You're not obligated to anything. You're obligated, because too much choice can be paralyzing. It can be like almost inducing anxiety.
Sure.
Because you don't know what quite to do. I've heard it said from immigrants that come from like, shitty third world countries, just like a different country other than the US, and they'll walk into like a CVS or a supermarket, and they're just like totally fucking overwhelmed by all of these choices. Like, what are you supposed to buy in the face of all of these options? It's a little paralyzing.
Yeah, to have your necessities in life imposed on you by your circumstances or the culture feels oppressive, when in fact it makes it clear cut what's expected of you and what to do to move through it. And like there's a balance in all of that. But there's a lot. That's like the amount of people going on these ayahuasca retreats and going to try to find the deeper version of the human experience and scour their feelings and brains and minds to find the meaning of it. It's because it's fucking slipping away for a lot of people. It's not clear what is expected of us, and parts of it feel like painting the fucking upstairs bedroom while the basement is on fire.
That's a good analogy. So I know that you did the ayahuasca thing last weekend. I think that's great and necessary to kind of shake things up once in a while. We did a similar thing in Teotihuacan. It's the pyramids here. And my friend Brandon, he said exactly that. We were doing it was a mushroom ceremony, and we did it. He wanted to get in touch with something more creative, because like especially for someone like him he has a good job, it's a bigger company, and he just has to be nice a lot of the time. As long as he's the nice guy, then there's no problem. But it can be paralyzing and feel so banal and deadening that you don't feel like you're doing anything other than kissing ass. And I get it. I know why he wanted to feel more creative. I fortunately don't have to deal with that problem, because my life is fairly well insane almost all hours of every waking moment. But, I understand where people are coming from. It's honestly one of the reasons why I hung on to my crazy business as long as I have, because I still like psychedelics. There's no question about that. I went to the mushroom retreat. I had a hero's dose of something wonderful and volatile. It was great. But the reason why I hold on to the business is because it's me in the road, man. If I don't do it, the whole thing would just fall apart and nobody would do anything. I have to hold it together. It has something of me. And if I don't do it, it'll slap me back or it'll drift away or whatever. And it is more clear. And there is a primalness in men, I think, especially, that have that need to be vital and to do something. I think that's why men, especially Bertio, our great uncle, worked till he physically was unable to ride in a car because of his shitty back when he was 74. Because the fuck else are you gonna do, man? You're gonna I don't know, just sit there and die or have opinions on things, or I don't know.
Yeah, I that's a good point. I do miss what I had built in the dog world, because there was an imposition of necessity where, despite what I may have wanted, 15 people are waiting for me that morning, and I have a need to do these things that, well, towards the end I got a little burnt out. People were relying on me, and I had a social utility that was undeniable. And so coming out and starting from scratch, you have to build all that back up, and there are a lot of aspects of that I really miss, because people, I've gotten a lot of comments lately oh, I didn't know you do this, oh, I didn't know you do that, oh, you surprised me with this, I didn't know you were so dynamic at that. I'm because none of you know fucking anything about me, man. I come here and I fucking start from brand new, and I surprise you that I play basketball and do this other thing. It's oh, fucking wow, I do a lot more than that, I assure you.
Right. But that's the whole point of that, is that all humans are kind of like that. We have these inner dimensions that a lot of times, and this is why I was never rushing out to get married or own a home and any of that, we get subsumed, we get taken under by these institutions that we're told from a super young age, probably before we're able to even really talk or articulate our own ideas, that you will be going to college, you will be having a family, you will be owning a home, you will be saving a this or that. It's all kind of indoctrinated. And there's this great line about how tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. Our father Lonnie will give me a hard time. Why don't you ever own a home? You could have done this. I'm I could have done a lot of things, but I got all these hot girls in my world. I got nothing but crazy stories. And when I'm living the thing, probably how when you feel when you have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to take care of 12 dogs or whatever, it's not easy to live it. My God, I want to do anything else. I have right now, I'm looking back at the board. I've got enemies and people that owe me money and people that I owe money to, all this crazy nonsense. And I'm well, to go through it, that's why I have gray hair on the sides right here. It's very stressful and it's chaotic. But when I tell the story, oh man, is it worth it? Because then we compare this to your average Joe Schmo or Jose Schmoze, who's, does whatever, punches a clock or makes a coffee or wears a tie and goes to work. That's the worst thing. That to fit right into that is nonsense and it's very, very deadening. So I don't know. That's a line from something. In life, we must choose between boredom and suffering. I'd rather take suffering with a side of light, hilarious stories. And if I can talk about the German cyber stalker or the girl that stole 90 grand from me or any of the other crazy bullshit in the business, and I get a laugh out of somebody, I was yeah, it's kind of worth it. It's fine.
Oh, the complex webs we weave. And eventually that web can control you a little bit. And there is an outer edge of that becomes a bit much. But yeah, it is adhering to a thing of your own creation. It's if you don't choose your burden to bear, it doesn't mean that you go through like Sam's burden. It means that an arbitrary one will be imposed upon you that isn't yours and will feel just as difficult, but will have nothing redeeming from it when it's just imposed upon by the path of least resistance. Well, I guess I'm doing this, and you don't get any meaning or value out of it. And so you choose your thing, you make it hard, you make it meaningful enough that it justifies itself along the way, and you got yourself a fucking thing.
Totally. That's your default future you're talking about. So the theme kind of here so far has been about legacy, and the default legacy is you're assigned, first of all, a gender, and then a sex, and then a career kind of based on university, and then a partner, and then a child, and then you just go through all these steps. And I think that's why both you and I don't know, I think I'm a little more outspoken than you, but we're both kind of on our own path, right?
Yeah.
Our father, Lonnie, was just like, it's whatever. And I'll buy into all of this Americana stuff and just totally go with it. And I don't know, when I hang out with them, I feel like I'm a space alien and I'm visiting like normal humans and like normal rock times or something. Like, it's just weird. And the things that are normal to me seem abnormal to him and vice versa. But I would rather have this like colorful story that is weird and doesn't really make any sense to anyone because it's fun. The biggest testament to everything that we're talking about right now is my choice to very, very briefly marry Alex, the French Canadian, because like it wasn't in the cards. She's too much of a rebel. I'm too much of a boss. It was never going to work out. We really kind of just did it for citizenship. I mean, I loved her. I still kind of love her, but like we really just did it for citizenship because she needed to get out of a pinch. And I was like, you're a fucking character. Let's go. Who cares? And to this day, I'll talk about whatever. I'll talk to Dad once in a while and I'll tell him about, you should really come down because when Alex came down to what? Alex came to Mexico City? Well, I thought, don't you guys get a divorce? I'm like, well, yeah, we don't want to be married, but like you give her a couple cocktails and a little bit of drugs, she's still hilarious. And everybody here likes her. Of course I bring her down to Mexico City 3 times. She's fucking great. This is character. I don't know. It's just one of those things. And doing things that either upset the status quo, not just for the sake of upsetting the status quo, but for the sake of your own like satisfaction of your own challenging, whatever the fuck, is kind of worth it. And I always find Lonnie to be kind of the contrarian indicator. I was like, well, if he agrees with it, I'm making a safe, stupid choice. And if he kind of or he's puzzled by it, and I'm like, this is probably the right move for me, I think.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he ever even had more than a 5-word conversation with Janice post-divorce outside of like 20 years later where they accidentally ran into each other at Burrito Express. So like the idea of speaking with an ex-wife for whom you've agreed to go your separate ways, and that agreement demands some sort of arbitrary hatred of the person that at one point you decided to spend your whole life with, is a little bit foolish, but also somewhat generational, because that was something that I had to come to terms with through the ayahuasca experiences, that Dad's upbringing and his parents, there was a much more narrow window of options available for him in that generation. And compared to his parents, I mean, that guy's a fucking superstar in comparison, leaving it kind of our responsibility to take anything infused by his existence, take it with us, and then discard the things that don't work. But just being raised in a sea of options like we were means that there's going to be a dynamicism that he isn't even capable of understanding because he wasn't created in an environment like that. And we just had more options in the culture, more options for how we were raised, and created very dynamic brained children. That meant that his version of it was never going to work. But to be fair, he was attempting to infuse that which worked for him onto us, and it just was never going to work. And he can't see it that way.
No, I know. And I always come back to that. This is why I still feel more connected to the Latino side of us than the Scandinavian side, because he's a good guy. He's not a bad guy. He's not a drunk. He didn't abuse anyone. If anything, he's too much of a square. And remember when we were kids and we would get spanked, it was very like clinical. It's like, here you are as a scolded child, and here is your prescribed spank. And it was not creepy or mean or painful at all. It was just like, I have received a spank. And sir, what do you call him? General principal, right? Yeah. Thank you, general principal. I have received your spank.
Talk about that all the time because I make the reference with dogs that like dogs understand consequences. They understand a thing was done that was not okay, and in that moment they were met with a disagreement, whether it's a swat, whether it's a tone, whether it's anything like that. They understand that completely. You do it angrily, you do it unhinged, you do it in a volatile way. They cannot deal with that level of unpredictability. And so I make the comparison between Mom and Dad, where she was unhinged and like the rules one day and the rules the next day were more based on her mood than they were on an arbitrary set of standards. And with Dad, it was just like, you knew what you were supposed to do and you didn't do it. I have prescribed you one spanking. Come over here and get it. And it was carried out emotionless, and you walked in like you were crying because you made a mistake, whatever it may be. But it makes sense. And Mom's version of the unhinged thing makes for a child that is like, But yeah, totally. The prescription of one spanking for your mistake at least makes sense to a child's mind.
Exactly. And I've had to watch out because, like, I don't know, Heather, who's been my dear friend for a long time, she says that we end up marrying the person that we had the most unfinished business with. So like when it was with Alex, Alex is the same birthday as Shannon, our half sister, and is the same Jewish in the same way where it's dad's side and not mom's side. And then Nikki, remember Nicole, who I was with for years, has the same birthday as mom. They're both Geminis and like a little bipolar like that. I've had to really watch who I decide to be with, because this is a person who had an okay childhood. Like, we were okay. Yeah. Part of it was not great, part of it was fine. I have to keep an eye on the white trash side, because Bree, the crazy girl from Alberta, is exactly like Anne on, you know, our aunt on mom's side. And I was, well, if I end up with them, they are emotionally unhinged. They're angry because they have some unresolved trauma from years ago. And then, of course, because I am very, like as you are, sensitive to other people that I'm around with, I vibe on their vibe, I will end up just like her. And by the end of 3 years of dealing with this very angry child, I was basically just with my aunt for 3 years, who I, of course, love dearly, but when she was much older, not when she was, 19 years old and kind of emotionally unstable, because it's sane. And if we bond to the thing that is all effed up, guess what? I promise you, if I were to have gone fight tooth and nail to keep this person in my life, even though she's young and ridiculous and wastes money and causes problems everywhere, I would probably become an angry alcoholic Erickson who beats people and is basically like a born to lose tattoo on my chest or something, because that's just how that side is. And we got to choose our partners carefully. That's what
I mean, that path was obvious to those of us on the outside of that situation.
Well, fuck you for not saying anything, because I didn't catch wind of that shit until a few months ago.
I mean, I don't know where my place is when a full-on adult chooses to live their life in the manner of their choosing. Listen up, adult. Stop doing the things that you want to do and do the things that I want you to do. I'm just not going to do it.
I know, but see, that's what happens is that, I mean, how far does it have to go? And so in the drug and alcohol world, right, because I worked at rehabs in Malibu for years, we say that we have an intervention when your life has become unmanageable. And when it's things like a drug or an alcohol, if you're sleeping on a dirty bare mattress and you've lost your job and you've alienated everyone around you, noticing what rock bottom is very obvious. But if you're in a toxic relationship, you were still probably putting on pants and like brushing your teeth every day. So your life is not fully unmanageable, but the emotional side, the side that we choose to like bond to somebody else, I think you're right. And I think it was, I knew at least subconsciously from like 2021 that Bree was a nightmare, but I still kind of liked her because she's hot and we had a weird kind of connection. And I don't know, man, it's in the future, I should give you a card. It would just be permission to have an emotional intervention if I've chosen a totally unacceptable female who's too young, too unstable, and spends all my money like an asshole.
We have had a verbal agreement. It has been recorded. It is in the cloud, and I will consider it. I will fetch it from the cloud and throw a reminder, because as the saying goes, never was I crazy except upon occasion where my heart was touched, or my dick, whatever it may be.
I think that was, what was that? Edgar Allan Poe?
Never was I crazy except upon occasion where my heart was touched. No, I think it was more a psychologist. Might have been Nietzsche. No, I don't have a good grasp on the who, but yeah, I mean, ending up in a situation where the strings are being pulled by our emotions, which as a man, our emotional intelligence just is always something to work on. Matters of the heart like that, boy, do we get pulled in some directions that are not ideal and not notice it till you're floundering on the rock bottom. And then while you're on that rock bottom, you see a crack of light in the floor and you turn into a vapor and you're like, watch how much lower I can go. There's a hole in that rock. There's a hole in that bottom. And you get to that next level down there and you're like, no, I think there's something lower than this. I'm going to check it out.
No. And I dealt with that even after knowing things about this person that we're talking about for a full year afterwards. And fortunately, her people in her world were kind of like more honest with me than she was willing to be. And I eventually had to kind of see things for what they are. But we're also hitting upon another point here, is that it's not necessarily life or death, right? Because like our needs are provided for. And it's not even like drug addiction where we've lost all our money and our health has been jeopardized, maybe our emotional health. Yeah. So what we're really saying is that we would like to raise what we think the bottom is a little bit higher. And I think that that's actually really, really important, because you don't have to live or die to fail or succeed. And you don't have to be sober or drug addicted to fail or succeed. Mm-hmm. Ideally, it's maybe in a half a step above that, in which not only are we maintaining positive relationships in our life, but they're ideally not with treacherous, deceitful, lying individuals who make us compromise our own beliefs and sabotage sabotage ourselves. That I think is a couple of notches from death or addiction, and yet vital to like who we are as people.
Yeah, but it's not always obvious until after the fact, because the stubbornness of the man sees a problem he can solve. Like as you get deeper into the fucking rock bottom, you're like, I see a potential way out. I mean, it's not obvious on the surface right now, but you know, I like solving a good problem.
So Austin and I, the guy that works in my business, he manages models too, and he's like, I always love me a crazy girl. And I was like, I think that's all men. All men want to have a project or like a thing that requires more of us. It's like the version of my friend Hunter going to Kiev for some reason in the middle of a war with Russia. Well, why would you go to a war zone? That seems crazy. Well, it's fucking boring at home. And all I can say is that, like, as long as the thing that you're doing only negatively impacts two people and doesn't detract too much from what you're doing, then it might be okay. But if I were to ever have had a child with this person, I would just be full white trash in like a few years. I promise you, like whatever side of me, that's like the Vader, Anakin dial. I mean, whatever good in me would have been immediately thrown asunder. And I would just like, I might have even sprung a mullet overnight just because that's kind of what would happen. Because that's, you lose yourself in that, and it doesn't happen overnight. And you're right, it's not easy to notice, especially to the person going through it, and you notice it later. But yeah, I think that's we can raise the bar just a little.
Yeah, I mean, I've always, for the most part, dated younger, partly because like my emotional maturity wasn't very high, whatever, and just with my ex, there was a disconnect age-wise, just based on our experience alone. And now my gal is my same age, and there is something that's been very comforting about having similar life experiences growing up culturally that I've really enjoyed.
Good for you. That's really important. Before we had our conversation today, our little show, I had a 5-hour catch up with this girl, Jackie, this French American girl that I've known for years. And she had a traumatic brain injury and had all these like very difficult life circumstances for like the last 10 years. And for whatever reason, it's something about Frenchies. I'm very like masculine, and the Frenchy girls, they tend to be very like effeminate. It's very dichotomous or dimorphic, let's say, with the gender. And the kind of conversation I had with her, because she's a little bit older, I think she's about the same age as Alex, so she's like mid-30s, was so much better than any conversation I had in 3 years of dealing with this impetuous boober child. And it's all about the way you connect with people, and it's about like your, I guess, emotional maturity. I don't know, but like it's one thing to like have a person that you're cool with and talk to every day. It's another thing to like get really deep into it for 5 fucking hours. I almost bailed on this. I was like, I've been talking for 5 hours, but you and I have that ability to bond in our own kind of way.
Yeah, I've had a few of these Saturdays that I've tallied up the time I've spent talking at the end of the night, because there's been times when I've left this and gone to somewhere where I have to talk for 2 more hours, and I'm like, well, it does seem like a lot, but I am grateful to be able to do that gracefully, because that's not a skill that comes easily to a lot of people, to be able to carry on dynamic conversations for 10 hours on a given Saturday.
And also to be like reasonably entertaining, because you know, I could talk about anything. Like if I had to be a filibuster, just like read from a cookbook or whatever those asshole politicians do. But ideally, are we saying something that might be of insight and value? And wow, if we're lucky, possibly, can I even crack a joke? Is that possible? I don't know.
Well, I got one more on my list for the day that is a little on the nose and probably a little overdone, but I made myself laugh out loud with how hilarious the premise is. Fucking small dick pills, dude. Like the amount of fucking grow your dick from a fucking stack of dimes into a mature eggplant in 4 weeks. Like that is, what does Kramer say? That's the biggest sham in retail since 1 hour Martinizing. Like A, not only doesn't work, will never work. Who even knows what's in there? And then what do you do in the end? You reach out and you're like, listen, I'm going to tell you a bit about my dick. Was small, is small, didn't work. Look at how horrible my dick is. I would like a refund. No, you take your tiny shameful dick and you fucking forget about that experience and you take the L on the chin, dude. You take your fucking shrimp dick and you mope back to your tiny dick room. You rub one out and you're like, boy, I really got hoodwinked on that one.
Yeah, I think men are kind of easy to fool when it comes to stuff like that, because like when we were talking about before about the pheromones guy, Steve, that was part of his business. There wasn't just that. There were penis pumps and pills. And the pheromone thing was the funniest because like you're supposed to put it in your cologne or whatever and shake it up and then wear it. And then just by like your odor, somehow you've like enchanted your female with the lure of the animal. And it was just so stupid. I mean, but with the people we would get, I don't want to say any names, it's embarrassing and it's also 20 years ago, but like there's this one Hollywood producer who's like very successful. And I was like, really? You think you need this? Okay, well, I guess everybody needs something, but it's all fakakta insanity. And I don't know. I think that men are stupid like that. We think that we're either going to like come up with a potion or we're going to buy it. And I will never take the potion, but I might have been guilty of trying to buy it at one point in time.
Yeah, man. But also I support and believe in with my whole heart a good placebo, man. Cause like you put those drops of fucking confusion liquid in your scent and you walk around with your fucking shoulders back and your head up, imagining just the moistness of any vagina in your vicinity. And you're like, yeah, that's fucking me. That's the lure. That's the fucking animal. And if you walk around feeling like that, if you genuinely feel like that, it is noticed. Nothing needs to actually be in there. If you believe it full on, something is going to go different. And then by fucking confirmation bias, with that confidence, you speak to one of these people and it works, and you're like, set me up with a fucking monthly dose of snake oil pheromones because I fucking nailed this one. Yeah, I like a good placebo, man. I think that is one of the most underrated human experiences that I'm sure has been studied. I don't know enough to really get into it, but there's the nocebo effect, there's the placebo, and the very fact that our own brain can make something true because you believed it is fucking beautiful.
Yeah, I kind of buy that too. That's the whole idea of like the pep talk, or I'm cutting out all of X, or I'm doubling up on all of Y, like whatever your thing is, especially around the first of the year, people are dragging all kinds of nonsense out of their lives. It's like, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to stop smoking. Like, I'm going to stop smoking, right? I said that I've smoked cigarettes since Alex. And I have a little thing, like a red thing I get on my lip, and I was like, okay, I don't need any more of that. So I just decided I'm going to stop. And I might ask you where you buy your little European, nicotine pouches, because I might need
anywhere, bro. You're just not you're not fucking, you go to Zimbabwe, dude, you're just not fucking hip to the Zins yet. And not only will you see how prevalent they are, but there is an entire culture around them. And like, so going to Zimbabwe is the fucking top tier joke that everything fucking plays off of, that me and my buddy both like the cinnamon ones. And it's just an endless stream of jokes. Cause like he has come off of vaping and all sorts of stuff, and I've gone sober. And then a lot of it is just fucking shifting addictions around to one that's less brutal for you. But the fucking bottom decker buzz bag, and we have all sorts of funny witticisms about how silly it is to take this fucking pouch and cram it in your face and think that you're doing anything other than just getting your nicotine from a different method. But smoking is not ideal, and nicotine, when used right, is a nice, useful tool for sure.
No, I know, and I'm not hating on it because for any other reason other than I think it offends people, and that so many people have made the transfer over to vaping. And I will vape a marijuana on occasion because it's fine and it's clean, but I can't get into vaping and nicotine because it hits me. And then I think of, as soon as I inhale nicotine, in my mind I hear that phrase "popcorn lung," where immediately both of my lungs turn into the driest, deadest, non-functional bag of popcorn, and I wither and die after one drag. But like, it just seems horrible. And I know, of course, tobacco it's bad, or maybe worse. I don't know what the science, but like, I don't want to have a chest full of dried popcorn.
Well, for what it's worth, you take a nice long drag off of a nicotine vape, and there's also a crackling sound that is just like synonymous with the vape. And if that doesn't paint the popcorn lung picture immediately, you're just a fucking Swiss cheese lung. All your alveoli are recoiling in absolute horror, like that fucking room of, I don't know what they're like, demons or something, or souls in The Little Mermaid. These brown shriveling things, that's now what your fucking Swiss cheese popcorn lungs look like. Granted, it's probably far worse with cigarettes, but at least that's known and has been around long enough to where, like, you know what you're getting into. But these fucking carrier oils and all these random things that they're putting in there for the delivery system of the vape nicotine, it is too new to really know how much damage you're doing, although we're getting close.
Okay, maybe we're close, but like, our grandfather smoked from the time he was also 14 until, I don't know, he was like 83 or something until like the last few years of his life. And I've seen what happens. He was a fatty and also was disgusting, and the teeth went, and it was a gross thing, but that's a known grossness.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about his life before really at all, because he was kind of estranged from our family. It's a dirtbag. But like I know that I've seen like this blonde child that I was formerly associated with from Alberta, Bree, that because she vaped so much that multiple times throughout the year, I mean, she was close to me for 3 years, multiple times throughout the year had been admitted to the hospital, had passed out in public, and had become so sick and so also deluded about it that not only was it not the vaping, but it was somehow related to her, what do you call it? Not lymph nodes, tonsils. No, it's my tonsil issues. I was like, no, you just vape in your sleep. You vape so much that it's like whatever is happening to your body, it doesn't agree with longevity or biology or anything, and it's just terrible. So I've seen enough of that, and also feel relatively assured about our like hardy Latino roots that I was like, okay, I can probably justify this. What I don't like, see if I can get close enough here. You can't really see it, but I've got a little brown on the top of one of my teeth, and the only thing, honestly, because so much is chaotic, that I have going for me is my nice white smile. And so as soon as that my nice white smile is called into question, I was like, okay, let's talk about your smoking, young man. I think it's about time.
All right, so two things on that. Yeah, the a cigarette is like a little event, a little ceremony. You're like, depending on where you are, you're kind of banished for you have to go to a separate spot. It's a whole thing, etc. And vaping is just so innocuous in how it's like the smoke that you blow into the air that people really do breathe on them like oxygen, man. Just hitting it. Someone hit it in the gym the other day, inside the indoor gym, and I'm like, I saw that happen, and I questioned whether it was legal or not. I'm like, he did that confidently. Now I'm questioning if this is even okay or not. And then I approached him, and right when I approached him, he was hitting it again, and I'm like, what are we doing here, dude? He's like, I'm not thinking. I hit this thing all day long, and I don't even think about it. And so the frequency of use with the vapes is a big part of why it's fucking a lot of people up. But then the reason that my feel free addiction came to a head, like I knew I was in too deep. I knew it was a problem. I knew my body was suffering for it. But I started to get a bunch of broken capillaries right through here on my nose. And so even though I was down fucking 40 pounds, as soon as my fucking mirror to the world, my face itself started to be compromised by this thing that I was doing, I'm like, all right, fucko, now it's not just all over your body and inside of you, but now it's visible from the outside. And so whether that was your fucking pride, your ego, the aesthetics of it, whatever, once it showed itself on my face, I'm like, listen, fuckface, it's time. Like, and it stayed. There's a little bit of like redness across here, and that's my little. I mean, you couldn't see it on this kind of lighting, especially because it's kind of warm. But it's my little relic from the experience. That it's like, hey, remember when you went so fucking hard for so long that it shows on your face? Like, yeah, thanks for the reminder. You fucking played yourself.
Well, at least we've established that with both of us, if we ever really get, kind of backed into a corner, that as long when it starts to hit how we look, vanity conquers all, and we'll let our own vanity beat this weird addiction, whatever the fuck it might be.
Not my outward handsomeness. Oh no! Like, yeah, but your liver is fucking done. Your brain will never be the same. Like, yeah, but I was showing just fine. I was displaying general health.